Welcome to the Complete Hypertension Solution Part 2. This is all about the causes and contributing factors. At this point, I want to make it very clear. We have a choice. We've got a choice to go down the natural remedies, common sense, science route, which is reduced blood pressure with diet and lifestyle factors, environmental factors, which you'll see later on, which is well supported in the scientific evidence, which improves your overall health. It doesn't just lower blood pressure, improves your overall health, and or it lowers your risk of many other forms of chronic illness. It improves your energy levels and your focus, concentration, lots of other issues in there. Or the other choice, the cons, is to go down the pharmaceutical model, which means you tend to get caught up in the pharmaceutical treadmill. Your overall health deteriorates because all it's doing is lowering blood pressure and not all those other things that are going wrong in the body. And literally, going on this treadmill increases your risk of other forms of chronic illness and side effects that I've already mentioned in part one. So it's your choice. I make it very clear here that I don't make any recommendations about coming off drugs. I will, however, highlight that they don't work anywhere near as effectively as the nutritional lifestyle programs, and the science supports that. There is so much good science in all of this. So where are we? At the basic core of all health conditions lies your immune system, endocrine system, which is your hormones, and your nervous system. And they're driven, or the negative aspects of them are driven by oxidation, inflammation, and metabolic dysfunction. The way I teach looking after your health is about the big picture, and that we're going to reduce all of these down: oxidation, inflammation, acidosis, so they stop impacting in a negative way on the immune system, nervous system, and endocrine system. And so all these chronic illnesses, including hypertension, at the same time, focusing on hypertension, is reduced as well. And it raises the question about what's in the genes and what's not in the genes. There's a process called epigenetics. And the reality is epigenetics is about diet, environment, attitude, and lifestyle. And it shows that the vast majority of illnesses and diseases, even hypertension, are not genetic. They're linked with these factors. And it's very clear. You might have everyone in the family, every uncles, aunties, cousins, mother, father, brother, children with hypertension. And the reality is it still comes down to what you do to your genes. What you do to your genes will determine if you have hypertension and all these other chronic illnesses. So why nutrition and lifestyle? Because nutrition is complex, about complex molecules that don't have one little bit of a function. They react and have interactions all through the body, not just on the arteries, but the whole system. There are multiple pathways that are both anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, and helping with these biochemical pathways. We've evolved with them, so our body is adjusted to them, accustomed to them, and actually needs them to interact with. And nutrition deals with the underlying causes and contributing factors. It can get rid of the symptoms just as much as the drugs, but it also deals with the underlying causes. So it deals with the causes, not just the symptoms. So that's why we're showing you this pathway a different way. And if you look at all the varying causes of hypertension, so if you go into your doctor should say, okay, look, have you been having stress in your life, sleep? Because stress and sleep problems can instantly, straight away increase your hypertension. Just going into a doctor is called the white coat syndrome. And even when I go to visit my doctor, which is once a year, I see him more regularly because I see him on the walking path and down the beach and things. But when I go there, my blood pressure goes up a little. Why? Even though he's a friend, there's still what's called the white coat syndrome. We know there are also pharmaceuticals that contribute to hypertension: inactivity, extra weight, smoking, alcohol, poor nutrition, processed foods. And I'm going to put up here sugar and refined oils, because these are the two main ways that we actually induce hypertension in animals when they want to test it. Yeah, it's so simple. To get a mouse or a rat to have hypertension, they give them refried oils, or they give them sugar, or they create stress in their life or inactivity, or get them put on extra weight, or do any of these other things, and they lead to hypertension. So we know the fundamental principles of what are the major causes of hypertension. And there are little bits and pieces we can do in here, but the answer, or this screen shows you that what we really want to do is understand what is our type of hypertension. Is it induced by a pharmaceutical? For example, if you're on warfarin, it can increase hypertension. Is it because you're inactive? And each of these will determine the program that you develop for yourself. We're going to give you the basics and all the information you need, but the program you can develop for yourself. If you've got extra weight, then clearly one of the things you want to do is look at our weight loss program in our membership. Yep. Look at that and say, okay, how can I lose weight? But this program will help you lose weight anyway, because of it's fundamentally coming from good health basic principles. Sugar, if you've got a sugar addiction, you consume lots of sugar. Well, guess what? You're going to have to stop. There is no way about it, but we'll show you all the science behind this as we go. Now, there are lots of factors that contribute to and interact to cause high blood pressure. We've got about 10 or so up here, and I'm not going to go into all of this. It's not important, but it is important to gain an understanding that this is complex and there are many different parts. That's why when you go to a doctor, they might put you on 3 or 4 various medications to lower blood pressure, and it's still not working. Remember that I talked about in the first seminar in part 1. What is important here is understanding there are many different mechanisms that can contribute to hypertension. So through nutrition and lifestyle pathways, we're able to interact, improve all of these. The one I do want to have a look at, because it will pop up a few times, is the blue one at the top called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, also called the RAS, because you'll see in some of the studies the RAS comes up. But in general, don't ignore this. It just shows how complex it is. So the root cause of hypertension is oxidation and inflammation and acidosis. It's the root cause of all these other illnesses down here. And that's why hypertension is linked with cancer comorbidity, skin cancers, colon cancers, obesity, multiple sclerosis, IBS, IBD, anxiety, depression. As I showed you in the first one. Why? Because we've got these fundamental things. So while this program is going to help you identify nutrients that are going to reduce your risk of hypertension by fixing the RAS system, working on the RAS and nitric oxide, what we're also going to do at the same time is lower oxidation, inflammation, and acidosis to get the body working as it should, so it can help repair. It's also critical, though, to understand that there are differences in how we react to certain pressures and certain nutrients on the other side to change our blood pressure. Being male and female, there can be slight differences in how we respond, old or young, overweight or not. A program around hypertension for someone who is overweight is going to be different from someone who is skinny but still has a lot of hypertension. And so there are differences in there, male and females. If you look at that bottom line there, the treatment with vitamin E and C reduces blood pressure in young male but not aged animals. Wow. Now, there are ways of improving that and working with that, but it shows that there are differences. Hence why you can develop your own program associated with what we're dealing with. Now, inflammation. I don't want to go into this. I'm not going to go into it, but I'll show you inflammation is the key to it. So what we want to do is lower inflammation throughout the program. There's another few more studies. In fact, in the last 12 months, there's been over 1,000 studies. Please don't let anybody tell you there is no evidence. There are 10,000 studies out there on how to reduce hypertension or how to increase hypertension the other way around if you want. Over 10,000 studies. And there is so much information. If someone says there's no evidence, I'm sorry, what they're doing is meaning they haven't looked for it. They're lazy, they're arrogant, they're ignorant, or they're just lying. One way or another, there are studies out there, and I'll show you. Another one, I put this one up because it was a study that showed C-reactive protein. C-reactive protein is one of the major ways that we measure inflammation in the body. So if you go to a good nutritional GP now, they'll say, okay, let's look at your inflammation, and they'll get your baseline C-reactive protein, CRP. And instead of worrying about cholesterol, which is a waste of time, they worry about your inflammation. And that inflammation is the underlying principle behind hypertension that I've highlighted, but also, as I've also shown you, without any doubt whatsoever, underlying hypertension. So if we lower that C-reactive protein, inflammation. So your doctors will do that on a regular basis. Hypertensive drugs. It's interesting to note that some of the hypertensive drugs actually work because they're mildly anti-inflammatory as well. The only thing is they have side effects, unlike the nutrition that is antihypertensive that has positive side effects. So highlighting that drugs can have a mild antihypertensive, sorry, a mild antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties too. I'll give you some of the statin drugs, for example, which, like many drugs, are derived from plants or natural sources. They actually have their benefit is only as a result of their mild anti-inflammatory effect. So we see it in medicine as well. Oxidation and hypertension, overwhelming studies, hundreds and hundreds of studies, the role of reactive oxygen species, which is free radicals, oxidation, leading to hypertension. In fact, if they want to create hypertension in mice, they will give them high doses of free radicals, poisons, toxins, or they'll cause inflammation in them. It's pretty simple how they do it. More studies. And we've got chronic low-grade metabolic acidosis. Most people don't understand it. I've written on this and present on this in the other program, so I won't go in any detail. But it's not as though your body becomes acid. It's just that your body is constantly under stress, trying to keep your body at this perfect balance of a pH of 7.36. And as it does that, it causes stress on the body. If you're having a lot of acid, overprocessed foods, sugars, processed foods, refried oils, all those things that you'll see up here, or even stress can increase acidosis in the body, then your body is not working well. So what we will do through the program is alkalize our diet more to take the extra stresses off our body. Immune system, there is no doubt that the immune system is linked through inflammation, either being pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, and hypertension. And so what we want to do is rebuild and look after our immune system at the same time. We know, for example, if you use immunosuppressive drugs that literally suppress your immune system, you can actually improve hypertension. You can lower hypertension in test animals. Now, you don't want to do that because your immune system is also working on the other side to stop all the bacteria and the viruses and the fungi and the molds and toxins and taking over your body. But it shows the role of the immune system and how important it is in hypertension. More studies on the immune system and hypertension. So what is hypertension? I want to give you the simplest explanation. And sometimes it's the simplest explanation is the best one. It's like my garden hose, okay? Now, a little bit better than my garden hose, our arteries and things, but it's like my garden hose. The pump is your heart, your pipe, this is my reticulation system, your pipes are your arteries, and your feedback valve are your kidneys, okay? So all of the flow of your blood around your heart is regulated by your heart, arteries, kidneys, and the various organs, how they come into play. Now, what happens in my garden is if I leave it out in the sun too long, it looks like this. It starts to oxidize. And when it's oxidized, it becomes rigid and hard. I'll call that inflammation. It starts to crack and break. Now, I can put Band-Aids on that, or I can prevent it from occurring or try to reverse it. Now, in this case, I can't reverse the damage done on my pipes, but we can reverse the damage, the oxidative and inflammatory damage done on our arteries. So basically, our arteries are becoming oxidized and inflamed, and as a result, blood pressure isn't working. Now, then we've got our regulatory systems like our pump, and our heart is obviously under the same type of oxidative and inflammatory stress. The poor nutrition, for example, can lead to this, and as a result. So our kidneys are the regulators. They're the ones who come back and say, okay, we want some, but not enough. And that's why lots of the comorbidity with hypertension is linked through the kidneys too. So if you've got hypertension, and or on hypertensive drugs, then you increase the risk of a lot of chronic kidney illnesses as well. So if you imagine it just like your garden system, the way you want to look after your garden system, better off fixing what's causing the underlying problems than trying to put Band-Aids on the top of it. So diets that cause hypertension. Now, there is so much information here. I'm going to have to break this into literally just the big studies that show about the diets, okay? And then later on, I'm going to break it down into the different foods and the food groups and the lifestyle and the other factors that contribute. But I wanted to make it sure that dietary intake is a leading risk factor for hypertension. So when you go to your doctor, any good nutritional doctor will say, what's your diet like? Okay, we don't follow the Heart Foundation because that's a crappy diet, what they do. And we don't follow that diet. And what we want to do is make sure you've got lots of nutrition. This is what a good doctor should be saying. Are you eating your fruit, nuts, veggies? Are you eating all of those things? Are you getting rid of the processed foods? And this is what the studies show. They show basically your modern dietary patterns, food patterns, and so on are positively associated with hypertension. Every single study out there. And your BMI, which is your body mass index, how much weight you have on, is related to your diet, which is related to hypertension. And again, thousands of studies on this, and they show primarily, if I sum it up, studies have shown that the meat dietary pattern in Chinese men, traditional dietary pattern in Korean and Dutch males, Western dietary pattern, the standard Australian or standard American diet called SAD, is linked with hypertension. On this note, I will tell you also that the Mediterranean diet is the opposite. Now, that's not the pasta diet. This is the Mediterranean, and I'm going to provide you with an enhanced Mediterranean diet and many other factors that can contribute. But clearly, diet plays a role. So clearly, diet is going to be a part of this. If you're not going to want to improve your diet and just go on the drugs, please don't bother wasting your time anymore. This is about the changes you're going to make to literally regain your life in lots of ways. And the simplest one is underhydration, not enough water, not enough people drink the required amount of water. In fact, some studies show somewhere between 60 and 97% of people aren't meeting the drinking water liquid hydration standards. And this is compounded by the fact that a lot of our foods are very dry. So your breads, your pastas, all these things are very dry in foods. Compare them to a watermelon or a zucchini, or your fruits and your vegetables, which are all very, very moist, meat very drying. So all of your processed foods, or most of them, are drying, and we're not having enough water. So it compounds the situation. And if you look at the facts and figures, hypertension is literally a risk factor of not drinking enough water. And if you imagine it's a pipe system that I gave you that little analogy, and there's not enough water in those pipes, okay, it's going to mean that the heart, the pump, is under stress to try and push it around because there's just not enough. It'll do everything it can. But if you're silly enough not to actually drink enough liquids, now the great thing is, the liquids, I'll give you a hint here, can be simple. It's got to include some water, preferably unfluoridated, and you'll understand why later. But it should be some water, some tea, a little bit of coffee is fine. Coffee, you'll see, not a problem, unless you've got a sensitivity or other issues related to coffee, then no, okay? But for about 90% of the population, coffee is actually a very positive drink. So you can have a bit of coffee, but don't try and drink 2 liters of coffee a day. That's not the point here. The point is to mix and match your drinks as much as possible. Start off with the water in the morning, have some green tea, have some orange juice, have some other juices along the way. Get rid of the sugary ones, the processed drinks. That's what we're talking about here, and up your drinking just a little bit. So just adding a glass or 2 of water a day can have a big impact in lowering your blood pressure. Wow. And they found this in Ramadan, where Muslim populations go without food and water during the day, and they find actually it increases their hypertension at night. Probably extra stress because they're hungry during the day too, but lots of studies linking not enough water, not enough liquids with hypertension. They did a water trial. So I like to find the studies which show exactly what I'm trying to get at here, okay? And this is a 12-week trial. And basically they gave people 500 mils in the morning, 550 mils in the evening. And as a result, they got about 1.1 litres a day. Their systolic blood pressure, remember, your systolic blood pressure is the pressure to push everything through the system, and your diastolic one is the relaxing one. So to push it through, relax. And that's what they're measuring there. And your systolic blood pressure in the intervention group decreased from 6.4 milligrams over 12 weeks. So no matter what, just by drinking an extra litre a day, it dropped blood pressure. Now, on all of these studies, what's important is their averages. So what we find is that the people who are dehydrated most may have even had a blood pressure drop of 20 millimeters of mercury or 20 points. And people who were hydrated most probably only had a 1 or 2 millimeter drop. So you've got to understand how these studies work. The people with the highest hypertension probably had the biggest change. Again, it might have been 10 or 15 millimeters of mercury, because what they're doing here isn't necessarily measuring everyone with the same hypertension rate, because it varies so much in the same conditions. But what it does show that that drinking a little bit of extra water a day can have a big impact, and it has it through the sodium excretion, water kidney pathway, changing your hormones and blood pressure, your resistance, a whole raft of mechanisms. Water plays a part. I'm constantly telling people, drink a little bit more water every day, a little bit more liquid, and I'm a big fan of water and green tea. How much water? Next question. Well, depending on who you're looking at, it's usually saying between 2 and 2.5 litres. That's the European, the Institute of the US Institute of Medicine suggests about 3.7 litres for men and 2.7, so a little bit more. Probably here in Australia, in hot conditions, you want to put in another 500 mil or even another litre. So, but using some common sense here, increasing your water, and if it's a really hot, dry day, increase it even more. If you're sweating a lot, increase it even more. Deep fried oils, another big one that's showing multiple animal studies. In fact, the studies are how to increase your blood pressure in mice so that they can test the drugs on it. Now, do you get the stupidity of this one? Yeah, they give mice and rats deep fried oils, so they've been refried a few times. So they give them deep fried foods, and like your Chinese foods that are refried, and your fish and chips that have been fried in the same oil, refried, not fresh oil, not fresh fried oil, but the refried oil, because it's because of the oxidation of it, the inflammation markers in there, and what are called trans fats in some situations. So the message is really simple. Deep fried oils are a major contributing factor, and we know that from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies. So message, start getting rid of the deep fried oils. Isn't this simple? Just start moving away as we go through the program. Reheated oil and blood pressure in mice, in rats, again, all of the studies are really showing exactly the same. Oil can be a problem, but reheated, refried oil is the real issue, and it's vegetable oils are the worst ones. So your sunflower, safflower, vegetable oils, not olive oil. By the way, extra virgin olive oil does the exact opposite, and we'll show you this later, but you don't want to refry it, do you? No. So you can heat it up, but don't refry it. Fried foods, so it show up exactly the same in the studies. So they increase your risk by about 250% if you have more fried foods in your diet. So that's a significant increase. That again, if you just look at, excuse me, what can you do to lower your fried food consumption? And if you are going to have fried food, have fresh oil straight away, used only once. But there's a couple of trans fats. Trans fats are regulated in most parts of the world except here in Australia. But trans fats have been linked with various forms of chronic illness, including heart attack, strokes, cardiovascular mortality, morbidity, and of course, hypertension. So trans fats, the biggest source of those are in your margarines, which, by the way, are a pet hate of mine. If you're on hypertension, a fake butter, get off it, get on butter. And you'll understand that as we go on. Get off all the margarines, despite what their health claims are. They're absolutely ridiculous and absurd. So please get off margarines. And trans fats in most countries, they regulate them. So you can actually, there'll be a message on the packaging saying the level. Here in Australia, we don't regulate it. Sugar, another big one. Sugar is consistently and overwhelmingly linked with blood pressure. It doesn't matter how many studies you want to look at. Again, hundreds and hundreds of studies. So every GP, every good nutritional GP, every health professional you see should be saying, and what's your sugar content like? Oh, you're still consuming oh no, really? Wow, one serve of, if you look down the page there, you'll see, all of the trials. A meta-analysis of 12 trials. So they brought these 12 different trials together over a period of 2 months. Ready? And an average spike of systolic blood pressure of about 6.9 and diastolic blood pressure of 5.6 associated with with sugar consumption. Another study showed that drinking sugar-sweetened beverages increases blood pressure by around about 12%. And every additional drink that you do, every additional can or glass of drink increases by another 8.2%. So you can actually add up. The more sugar you have, the higher the hypertension. The lower sugar you have, the lower the hypertension. It does. It's really clear cut. You need to get rid of the sugar. And of course, what do? You replace it with nutritious food. Now, by sugar, I'm not talking about the sugar in your fruits and your veggies. I'm talking here the added sugar in your soft drinks, in your sugar, in your coffee, in your tea. Drink more tea, have a little bit of coffee, get rid of the sugar. So again, you look at the figures and all of them show that the more sugar they put in there, the higher the rates of hypertension. And one of the remember I mentioned the RAS system, the angiotensin system earlier, and it shows that the sugar literally played havoc with that system, which then led to an increase in blood pressure. But why I put this one up, because here is a little study that showed that when they gave them niacin bound with chromium, it lowered the blood pressure. So what we're after now is foods that have more chromium in them and a bit of niacin, which are quite common in nature, that can help with lowering blood pressure. But lots more on that later. Sugar reduction, studies where they've gone in and they've measured the hypertension in the beginning over anything from 3-4 weeks to 12 weeks. They've gone in and seen as soon as they get people and they lower their amount of sugar they're taking in, usually through their soft drinks and usually through their drinks, literally it shows a dramatic and significant reduction. So just by getting rid of your sugar sweetened beverages, etc., it'll make a big improvement. And the longer you do it, the better it is, because it takes stress off your system and enables your body to heal a little bit more, and you're replacing it with other nutritious drinks as well. So cross-sectional studies have shown exactly the same. What's interesting here is the studies have also shown that the artificial sweeteners are just as bad, if not worse, than the sweetened ones, like this one here, a study of soft drink consumption around 5th graders. And yep, guess what? 5th graders have hypertension. These are the kids in primary school and high school have it because of the sugar and the refried oil and the poor diet and lifestyle factors. And you don't want to put them on medication, and you don't want them on the treadmill, although many of them are already. It scared me recently when a friend of mine said, look, my son, he's 6 and he's got these conditions. And the doctor said, well, you better go on this medication, but he'll be on it for the rest of his life. My golly, something is wrong with that GP. To say, hold on, what's happening? He wasn't sleeping well. Guess what? He wasn't doing this well. He was doing that. So as soon as they started reversing it, within 2 weeks, they showed dramatic improvements and literally have decided not to go back and see that doctor. Wow. That's where they lose credibility, because the GPs are not talking about nutrition, getting off soft drinks. When I was a kid, yeah, we had one can of soft drink a week. That was it. That was a birthday or a celebration. Now you get boxes of it. Kids drink it all day. I see kids walking down the street with a, 1.5 liter bottle of Coke. And I cringe to think how much hypertension, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, 1, 2, all this is contributing to, simply because we're not standing up. So the message is even the artificial sweeteners contribute to hypertension, in fact, more so than the soft drinks themselves with sugar in. Potato, this is one of the foods that comes up and says, okay, now you're thinking, oh, do I have to give up my potato? Well, have a guess. It shows that the French fries increase more, but the reality is having a little bit of potato in your diet, and I'll show you how later on to improve the nutritional status of your potato and so on, is not going to be an issue. But what it is that the more you process any type of food, or if you can get rid of those starchy foods out, and there are actually lower starch potatoes now, lower GI potatoes on the market. So you can look for these. And all of these things are a little 1% factors. And I'm going to be adding lots and lots of these 1% and 5% and 10 and 20 and even 50% factors in there. The same with noodles. Processed grains lead to an dramatic increase in hypertension. So if you're going to have breads and pastas and any type of grain noodles, then you want to make sure it's wholemeal, whole grain, and extra fiber added in. You get that? Whole meal, whole grain. Now, I'm not a big fan on grains anyway, so you can reduce them and add in more nuts and seeds and other things. That we'll show you some of this later and why. But at the end of the day, all of the processed grains literally increase the risk of hypertension. Alcohol. Lots of people are out there of the misgiving that alcohol has some benefits. Oh, hold on, it's got this great antioxidant called resveratrol. Resveratrol is antihypertensive, anti-heart attack, anti-cancer, anti-diabetes, and all these fantastic antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. Only problem is you have to have 300 glasses of red wine to get a daily dose. So you don't get enough. No, you don't think you're going to drink that many because that will cause you. Don't worry about the hypertension. The alcohol will cause you. Alcohol has lots of other problems, particularly the alcohol content. And so the studies basically show that alcohol consumption is linked with elevated blood pressure. Look, I have a glass of wine. I like a glass of wine, but it's about having a glass of wine when I'm relaxed and enjoying it. And it's a glass or two of wine, and it's not every night, and it's not all the time. And it's about understanding alcohol. Start limiting it. If alcohol is an issue, then start limiting it, restricting it again, like all these things. But you'll see the program. Lots and lots of studies on alcohol. There's no doubt about the link between alcohol. So what are some of the other causes of blood pressure? Because it's not just diet related. And one of the scariest things for me was coming across all the literature on maternal programming. So when and this, by the way, isn't going to help you, but it may help your family, it may help your grandkids, it may help your kids, it may help other people who you can share this with. And it's basically showing that if the mother is on a hypertension diet, and in other words, a processed Western diet with high sugar, high fructose, high refried oils, lack of exercise, all those things, any and all of these things, they're going to lead to a greater risk of the baby when it grows up or gets a bit older, developing hypertension. So there's a direct correlation between what the mother has. And think about it, because the infant in utero, in the womb, and being breastfed is getting the nutrients directly from the mother to set the programming, the epigenetic programming for the rest of their lives. Now, the great thing is we can redo that programming, but it takes more nutrition and lifestyle factors. But here, this is really about, this is all programmed. All these young things we've said. So what does cause it? Maternal undernutrition, obesity, not breastfeeding, smoking, gestational hypertension, which is quite common. So women, when they're pregnant, they will develop a form of hypertension. And the great thing is, in our program, there are lots of areas where we talk about this and the role of nutrients and lifestyle in reducing hypertension in gestation. So lots of things, low vitamin D, overuse or wrong use of medications, a whole raft of these things. And of course, this is something we can share because it's not generally known. The mother's health will determine the health of that infant, which will determine the health of that infant, believe it or not, for the rest of their lives and even for the next generation. So let's get it right now. That's why I'm so adamant and passionate about getting this message across, because it can influence so many people over so many lifetimes. Fetal weight, low fetal weight is usually a risk for increased body mass index and hypertension later on in life. So you see how it works. Programming maternal generated animal studies have shown that it works through the RAS system and oxidative stress and inflammation. I'm shortchanging or going through quickly. Protecting yourself. The great thing is, there are now studies, and I'll put lots of these up, but nearly all of the things I'm going to talk about that reduce your hypertension also improve the programming of the mothers as well. So lowering oxidation, lowering inflammation, improving gut health, a low fat, a healthier fat diet, more antioxidants. All of these things are linked with reprogramming or protecting the mother and the infant. So encouraging mothers to have more of the type of things I'm talking about can actually really change the presentation of the health for that infant as they grow up for the rest of their life. Weight, obesity, without any doubt, is a major player in hypertension. So one little change in the studies, it's a 1 point increase in your body mass index is associated with an 8 to 10% increase in hypertension. So the reality is what we want to do, if you've got a little bit more gut fat there, visceral fat, fat around the belly and so on, then we want to work on lowering that. That's why we've got a weight loss program in the membership. And you'll find that the weight loss program will talk about lots of the things I'm talking about in hypertension, but give you different directions and different influences. But this program I'm talking about is also will help you lose weight as well, without going on any crazy, ridiculous diet, which usually is not very good for you. So the message is we have to get in there and look at weight because of the role of weight. More studies on weight and blood pressure, more than 1,000 studies on it. So again, you have to just understand that stress is a big one, and everybody knows this. And all the studies show that stress, various psychological stresses, whether it's a short-term stress, long-term stress at work, family stress, financial stress, mental health issues, any of those all linked with increasing the risk, dramatically increasing the risk of hypertension. So going on a drug isn't going to work to fix that. So what you want to do, that's why it's so important to understand. If you've got stress in your life, then one of the few things that's going to work on that is to actually learn to manage your stress. I know it sounds obvious. Oh, but I thrive on stress. Rubbish. The way we look at stress, the way we look at the issues or the stress issues around us will determine how much stress we have. And so one of the most important things about stress, and we'll reiterate lots of things to do with this in the program later on, but one of the certain most important things is to ask the question of what do you get out of what you do? How important is it for you? What I do for me is critical. I'm passionate about it. This is my life process to educate people on this, the common sense, good science stuff. And as a result, the things that are more stressful are less stressful because I understand my motives for doing it. So just by looking at what drives you and thinking, wow, is that a real stressor or is that, and the way we look at it can make a big difference, but a lot more on that later. A lot more on stress, thousands of studies. Sleep. There's sleep, depression, hypertension link. And both depression and sleep independently, poor sleep that is linked with hypertension. If they want to cause hypertension in rats, what they do is they cause them to have poor sleep. So they keep them up for a night or so and their hypertension rate goes up. Insomnia across the board is associated with hypertension. All of the sleep-related illnesses, which I'll show you in a moment, are all linked with it. So the message is trying to deal with hypertension caused by poor sleep or depression or anxiety or a psychological issue or anything of those is ridiculous trying to treat it with medication. What we need to do is go back to the basics. Nutrition can support it, but then we also need to look at lifestyle programs in there too. There are some simple strategies. For example, I'll give you a hint now. A little bit of tryptophan at nighttime and in the morning can make a big difference with sleep, depression, and hypertension. Wow. What? Yep. And many other factors. It's one of the major gut neurotransmitters. So it can help, it literally can help with reflux and SIBO and IBS as well. Wow. And all it is an amino acid called tryptophan. And if you follow on later on, I'll show you the links where you can get that. Some of you may already know, but the message is a simple strategy like that can help with all those. Whereas what medication does, it deals with one aspect and not dealing with that big picture in there. So look at how these all relate. Sleep, duration of sleep, the type of sleep you have, the regularity of the sleep, all of these are linked with hypertension. Obstructive sleep apnea linked with hypertension. Reflux linked with hypertension. By the way, reflux is linked with poor sleep and stress and other issues too. But what was interesting in this study is when they controlled the refluxes, and that's what I do in my complete reflux solution program, when they controlled reflux, blood pressure dropped. So it's a bi-directional thing. So reflux can contribute to hypertension and hypertension can contribute to reflux. But if you can stop that reflux, then hypertension can be reduced as well. Now that's not everybody. That's a very different, you may not have reflux, therefore it's not relevant. But given that 25% or more of the population have reflux, probably about 50% of the population with hypertension have reflux. That's an estimated guess there. And so it's worthwhile. And that's why we have our complete reflux solution in our membership program. Wow. Do you see how fantastic because we see all these diseases related, and therefore we try and work with them. Environmental toxins. There is no doubt about the role of environmental toxins. And the unfortunate thing is many of us have been exposed to toxic chemicals without knowing why. Now, there is other information in our membership program to find out more about toxic heavy metals. I'm not going to go into it more, but water is a major one of these. Yeah, heavy metal concentration, plastics, plastic bottles, plastic containers, plastic things you put in your I don't have a problem with microwaves. I do have a problem with putting plastic in microwaves and cooking in it. That's one of the worst things you can do. It's like putting it in boiling water. Yeah, it starts to melt. That's what happens in the microwave. The plastic starts to break away. Even if it's microwave safe, that's saying it's not going to collapse. But these little plastic phthalate particles release into the food. So get rid of the plastics around any of your food and any of your water that you can, okay? And then also all the other toxic concentrations. Now, one of my pet hates is fluoride. Fluoride we add to water is linked with hypertension. Wow. The fluoride put in water in Australia, now most other countries have now removed it, but the fluoride, it doesn't just contribute to thyroid problems, ladies, hypothyroid and all these other issues. It doesn't just contribute to a lower IQ in children. It doesn't just contribute to various cancers, degradation of the stomach lining, but it also contributes to hypertension. So residents who drank water with high fluoride levels, and that's what you get in Australia, had a 230% higher risk of hypertension. And multiple studies show this link. So what we want, because what it does is causes a stress on the system. Taking a drug to lower that hypertension is ridiculous. Getting rid of the fluoride. Go to our website, drdingle.com, and we'll show you the water filter that we sell and we use in our home as all our family use. So it takes the fluoride out 99.9%. And that's what we should be doing rather than putting it in. And it's only the stupid politicians out there who are influenced by the literally the drug and chemical industry. Isn't it ridiculous? We're putting a toxin in the water, which leads to a need for extra drugs. Something sounds a bit fishy there. More on environmental toxins, lots of studies on environmental toxins. So one of the things I am always encouraging people to do is lower their exposure to toxic chemicals. Now, I started out my research back in the late 80s, all about toxic chemicals, and then went into nutrition and lifestyle, but it always comes back. So we want to lower it. Lots of information on the membership, and we've got books on it. We've got information materials on it. Lower your toxic exposure. It may even be your personal care products. And there is information on our membership on that one. Look at ways of lowering your toxins. Pharmaceuticals that cause high blood pressure. Here's a list of the ones. I don't have to go through there. You can scan it at your leisure and see the various ones that may be linked with it. And of course, unfortunately, if you've got high blood pressure because you're using a couple of these drugs, then the doctor will put you on another one. So you've got three. And when you've got 2 or 3 drugs interacting together, you have no idea what's going on in your body. No idea, nor do the doctors, nor do the pharmaceutical companies. Now, you may think I'm a bit fanatical about this, but that's because I see the worst case scenarios out there when people have, literally they're dying from the pharmaceuticals. And that's the scariest part for me, when nutrition and lifestyle, it can resolve 99% of these type of issues. So look at these drugs and go, okay. Then you look at warfarin. Warfarin literally may increase your systolic blood pressure. So that's what they do. They've done the studies on rats. And then there's an association with humans and patients taking warfarin. So we know it's linked with increasing blood pressure. Hold on, but isn't that supposed to thin your blood? Yes, well, have a think about it. Thinning the blood. I want to actually get more. Oh, maybe it's a problem with this underlying system. And there are many things you can do nutritionally that work so much better than the pharmaceuticals. Antidepressants and pregnancy, hypertension. So antidepressants that are used during pregnancy can increase it. We also find that women who are on any of the antidepressants and so on, anxiety, increase hypertension. Contraception pills linked with it. There was a 47% increased risk of hypertension in the person using the women using the lowest contraception rates to the highest contraception rates. And the studies over a long period of time show much the same. So we know that. And that's okay. But understand that if you're on any of these medications, then you need to understand that one of the best things you can do is the nutrition and lifestyle approach to help rebalance that a little bit. So where are we at? Part 3. reducing hypertension through diet and lifestyle. I've given you a couple of little hints already. I've given you lots of information. I've given you studies and information that you would not find anywhere else. Part 3 and part 4 are going to be so in depth. They're actually very, very large. So I'm going to break them down into their component parts. But you've already got lots of little hints in part 2. Now, if you've liked this presentation, tell your friends about it. Start sharing this information with them, because this is science-based, not pharmaceutical, market, media-based. This is science-based information. So I appreciate everything we've done here, guys. Go out and start, I suppose, implementing your own program already. But part 3 is already there, so have a look at it.